It was a Wednesday morning. The sun was still sleepy behind the clouds, and the school building stood tall like it always did, full of noise, rushing feet, and scattered voices. In the middle of the hallway, students walked with backpacks swinging, some laughing, some yawning, and some just trying to get to class without being noticed. The walls were covered with posters for school dances, sports games, and club meetings. Everything seemed like an ordinary day, but something happened that wasn't ordinary at all. A black girl walked down the hallway by herself. She had her books tucked close to her chest, her head held high, and her steps steady. She didn't walk too fast, but she didn't move slow either. Her hair was in neat braids, and her eyes looked straight ahead. She didn't bother anyone. She didn't speak to anyone. She just wanted to get to class. That's when 3 students stepped in front of her. They were loud and grinning for no reason. They blocked her path like they owned the hallway. Other students started to glance their way but didn't stop. They thought it was just another joke or prank. They didn't know what was about to happen. One of the bullies reached out and grabbed her collar. He tugged it, not playfully but with a rough hand, like he wanted to show power. Another one snickered and said something mean about her skin. The third one just stood there laughing, as if it was all funny. For a moment, it felt like the hallway got quieter. Some kids stopped walking. A few turned their heads. A teacher's voice echoed from far away, but it sounded distant, like it was behind a wall. The girl did not shout. She did not cry. She did not back away. She looked at the hand holding her collar. Then she looked at the boy who had touched her. She slowly reached into her bag and took out a small notebook. It was black with gold corners and had pages filled with neat handwriting. She opened it to a page she had marked earlier with a folded piece of paper. She didn't yell. She didn't push anyone. She simply began to read. Her voice was calm, like a quiet drum that you could still hear even in the middle of noise. She read a message that was not about hate. It was not about pain. It was a message about strength. She said, "I am not small. I am not dirty. I am not a joke. I am not someone you get to scare. I walk with more than just shoes on my feet. I walk with pride. I walk with history. I walk with every girl who has been told to stay quiet. And today, I will not be silent." The hallway froze. The hand on her collar let go. The laughter stopped. Some kids looked down at their shoes. Others looked at her like they were seeing her for the first time. A tall boy who usually stayed quiet in the back of the class blinked and stopped chewing his gum. A girl near the lockers dropped her phone without noticing. One teacher, who had just come around the corner, stopped in their tracks. No one knew what to say. The air felt different, as if something real had just happened, something that could not be ignored or laughed away. The bullies didn't speak. They didn't have a word ready. Their mouths were open, but their voices were missing. They had come looking for a reaction. They had wanted fear or anger or tears. They didn't expect truth. They didn't expect someone to stand strong without shouting. The girl closed her notebook and placed it back into her bag. She didn't hurry. She didn't look around for applause. She just walked past the 3 students who had tried to make her feel small. She walked like the hallway belonged to her too, because it did. She didn't need to be loud to be powerful. She didn't need to push to be seen. Her silence said enough. Her words stayed in the air even after she had turned the corner. That morning something shifted, not because of fists or shouting, but because one girl chose to speak with her heart. And the whole school felt it. The next day, the school building looked the same on the outside. The bricks were still red and the windows still reflected the sky like glassy lakes. But inside something had changed. It was not a loud change. It was not a visible change. It was the kind of change that starts in people's minds when they see something they cannot forget. The girl arrived at school like she always did. Her bag hung from one shoulder. Her shoes made soft sounds on the floor. She passed through the doors without looking around. She did not smile. She did not frown. She was just herself. But even that, just being herself, felt different now. Students watched her more carefully. Not in a mocking way like before, but as if they were waiting to see what she would do next. She went to her locker. She placed her books inside. Then she did something new. She reached into her bag and took out a small sheet of paper. It had words written in the same neat handwriting from her notebook. She looked at it for a second. Then she taped it on the inside of her locker and closed the door. That could have been the end of it. But it was not. Later that morning, during the break between first and second period, a student walked by her locker. He opened the one next to hers and saw the paper taped inside. He glanced at the words and then he stood still. His hand stayed on his locker door, but he was not looking at his books. He was reading. The note said, "You cannot break someone who knows they are whole. You cannot erase someone who was never afraid of being seen. My skin is not a costume. My hair is not strange. My voice is not too loud. My presence is not a problem." He read the words once. Then he read them again. Then he walked away without saying a thing. But something inside him had been touched. That afternoon, another paper appeared. This time it was in the girls' classroom, taped near the light switch. No one saw her put it there. It was just there, like a message waiting to be heard. This one said, "Being different is not a reason to hide. It is a reason to stand tall. Your shade, your name, your story, your walk, your words, your rhythm. All of it matters." Some students read it quickly and moved on. Some read it and whispered to each other. Some said nothing but remembered the lines like a song they could not stop humming. The next day, even more papers showed up. One was on the bathroom mirror, another on the gym door. One even made its way into the music room, placed carefully between two trophies. All written by hand, all powerful in quiet ways. Students started talking. Who was putting up these notes? Why did they sound like the girl who had spoken in the hallway? Was it really her? No one had seen her posting them. No one had proof. But many believed it was her. And whether it was or not, the words had already started to change things. Something strange and good began to happen. Students who had never spoken before started sharing the quotes they found. A boy from the chess club read one to his younger sister. A group of girls made a game of finding the notes and reading them out loud. Even some teachers began to notice. One English teacher asked her class to bring in quotes that made them feel strong. 3 students brought in messages that sounded like the notes from the hallway. Some students felt confused. Some felt ashamed for laughing at jokes that were not really funny. Others felt curious and began to ask questions they had never asked before. Why did people make fun of hair that was curly or thick? Why did some students get stopped in the hall more than others? Why did being quiet mean you were weak? Not all the questions had answers, but asking them was a beginning. The girl never stood up in front of the class to explain herself. She never said she wrote the notes. She just kept walking to class, listening more than she spoke. But her notebook grew fatter with each passing day. More words, more lines, more truth written in silence. Then one morning, a large piece of paper appeared on the bulletin board near the school entrance. It was not typed. It was handwritten like all the others, but this one was big enough for everyone to read. It said, "The words you use can lift or crush. The jokes you tell can heal or harm. The way you look at someone can open a door or close it forever. So choose with care. We are not just students. We are humans carrying stories no one sees. Let kindness be your habit. Let justice be your voice." It was signed with just one letter, the letter Z. No one knew what it stood for, but that did not matter. The letter became a symbol. Students began calling the notes Z's letters. Some wrote their own letters and posted them. The words began to spread beyond the hallway where everything had started. The bullies, the ones who had grabbed her collar, noticed all of this. First they laughed. Then they stopped laughing. Then they began to avoid her. Not because they were afraid of her fists, but because her words had made them small in a way they did not understand. They did not know how to fight back with kindness. They did not know how to handle someone who did not shrink when they tried to scare her. In a strange way, her silence made more noise than all their shouting, and her words had found a home in more hearts than they could count. By the end of the week, something was clear. She had not just stood up for herself. She had started something that no one could stop. Not the teachers. Not the students. Not even the ones who had tried to hurt her. Because truth is like a flame. Once lit, it spreads. and the school had started to glow. The third week after the hallway incident began like any other. The bell rang. Doors opened. Students poured into the building like waves into the shore. Backpacks bounced. Laughter floated in the air. But beneath the noise, something new was growing. Something invisible but strong. A quiet awareness. A slow movement. Not a protest. Not a fight. Just a change in the way people began to look at one another. More letters had appeared. They showed up on stair rails, tucked inside lockers, even folded into library books. The handwriting was the same. Careful. Sharp. Honest. But now there were new voices joining in. The original notes had lit a fire and now others were adding their own flames. Someone from the art club made bookmarks with powerful lines from the letters. A tall boy from the basketball team, who used to stay out of anything serious, started bringing printed versions of the notes and handing them out in the cafeteria. He did not say much. He just gave them away like small gifts. The students who received them often paused for a moment before folding them into their pockets like something valuable. In one classroom, a girl who had always kept her hoodie up raised her hand for the first time that year. She asked if she could read a note from the wall out loud. The teacher nodded. She stood up, her voice small at first but steady. She read, "My face is not something to fear. My words are not too much. I will take up space. I am not here by accident. I belong like the sun belongs in the sky." The room was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from boredom, but the kind that comes from respect. The kind that means everyone heard the words with their hearts and not just their ears. At lunch, the tables were still crowded. The noise was still loud. But some students began to sit differently. Some of the kids who had never spoken to each other before began sharing their own stories. They talked about things that used to stay hidden. Times they were teased for their names. Times they felt invisible. Times they wished they could just disappear. And slowly, those stories made other people feel seen. Like they were not alone. A boy who wore a hearing aid sat with a girl from the poetry club and a kid who always wore comic book shirts. They passed around a copy of one of the notes and each shared what it meant to them. Not just what the words said, but how it made them feel inside. In the back of the school, near the music room, someone hung up a big poster made of many smaller letters taped together. Each square had a different message. Some were simple, some were deep, but all were true. The poster was titled "The Wall of Words." Every day more notes were added. Some were signed with initials. Some had no names at all. One teacher, the kind who wore old sweaters and kept plants on her desk, started a lunchtime group. She called it Circle of Voices. Anyone could come. No one had to speak. No one had to be brave. They just had to show up. The girl with the notebook came, but she did not sit in the center. She stayed near the wall, listening. She did not speak often, but when she did, everyone leaned in closer. One day, during the circle, she brought her notebook. Not to hide it, but to share it. She opened it and read a new note. Her voice was soft but clear. She read, "You cannot choose where you are born or how people treat your skin, but you can choose who you are. You can choose not to turn away. You can choose not to stay quiet when someone else is hurting. Kindness is not weakness. Standing up is not rude. Being human means caring." Some students had tears in their eyes. Some stared at the ground. Some nodded slowly. From that day, more students began attending the circle. It grew until it needed a bigger room. Even a few teachers joined in, sitting on the floor with their legs crossed like students. One of the most surprising changes came from the student council. They had always focused on dances and pizza parties and posters for bake sales. But after seeing the change in the school, they wanted to help. They asked the girl if she would speak at the next assembly. She said no. Not because she was afraid, but because she believed the words did not belong to just her. So instead, the student council read a collection of the notes aloud at the assembly. Each member took a turn. It was not a performance. It was a message. They read, "We are more than our clothes. We are more than our silence. We are more than what people say behind our backs. We are people. With names. With families. With hearts. And we deserve to feel safe." The gym was full. Hundreds of students sat on the floor or on benches. Some had their arms crossed. Some had their chins in their hands. But all were listening. And when the last note was read, no one clapped. Not right away. They just sat in silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel awake. The kind that makes you think. Even the teachers noticed something different. Fewer students were getting into fights. The office was quieter. People were saying thank you more. Students who once walked alone now had someone beside them. No one could explain it fully, but it was there. A change that could not be undone. The girl with the notebook kept writing. She still placed notes around the school. But now she was not the only one. Her quiet strength had made others brave. Her words had opened doors that had been shut for a long time. By now, everyone knew something was happening. Not a trend, not a moment, but a movement. Not built on loud speeches or posters, but built on truth. Built on kindness. Built on the power of a girl who chose not to fight with fists but with words. She had not set out to be a leader. She had just stood her ground. But in doing so, she had helped others find their voice. And those voices were beginning to rise. Weeks passed and the school continued to change. The halls were still filled with chatter and footsteps, but now there was something else. Something quieter but heavier, like the weight of thoughts people carried with them. The girl with the notebook kept writing and sharing her words in small ways. She did not seek attention, but she had become a part of the heartbeat of the school. The wall of words grew bigger and brighter, and the circle of voices meetings were filled with students and teachers alike. What started as a small act of courage had spread like a gentle wind, moving through every corner of the building. But change was not easy for everyone. Among the students who had been part of the bullying, one boy struggled the most. He was tall and strong and used to getting his way. But inside he carried something heavy, something no one had ever asked about. The boy had reasons for his anger that no one understood yet. Not even him. His family life was difficult. His father was strict and angry, and his mother worked long hours just to keep the house running. He had been taught that showing weakness was bad and that power was the only way to survive. This boy was the same one who had grabbed the girl's collar in the hallway weeks ago. One afternoon, after school, the boy was called to the counselor's office. The counselor was a calm woman with kind eyes who had been watching the changes in the school quietly. She asked him to sit down and talk. At first, he was silent. His jaw was tight, his arms crossed, but the counselor did not rush him. She waited patiently. After a long pause, he began to speak, not about the girl or the notes, but about himself, about feeling invisible at home, about how he sometimes felt scared and alone, about how anger was the only thing he knew how to show. The counselor listened without judgment. She helped him see that his anger was not who he truly was, that he could choose a different path if he wanted. It was the first time the boy heard words like hope and healing instead of blame and punishment. The counselor suggested something the boy had never considered before. She said, "Would you like to meet the girl you hurt? To talk with her and understand what you did from a different place?" The boy was shocked. He was not sure if he wanted to face her. He was scared. But the counselor explained that this was not about blaming or punishment. It was about listening and understanding. About finding peace instead of carrying pain. After many days of thinking, the boy agreed. The day of their meeting arrived. They sat in a quiet room at school. The girl brought her notebook but did not open it. The boy looked nervous but tried to be calm. The counselor sat between them to help if things got difficult. The girl spoke first. She said, "I was scared when you grabbed my collar. I did not know what you wanted, but I chose not to be afraid. Because I have to believe in something bigger than fear." The boy looked down. He felt ashamed but also curious about her strength. He said, "I never wanted to hurt you. I was angry at other things. I took it out on you because I didn't know what else to do." The girl nodded. "That anger does not make you a bad person. But it does not give you the right to hurt others. We all have pain. But we have to find better ways to heal." They talked for a long time. About fear and anger and hope. About mistakes and forgiveness. About being seen and heard. The boy said, I want to change, but I don't know how. The girl smiled softly and said, it starts with listening, with honesty, with small steps. You can be different if you want. When the meeting ended, something inside the boy shifted. It was not magic. It was not sudden, but it was real. He felt lighter, like he was carrying less weight. He understood something he had never understood before. That kindness could be stronger than fear. That courage was not just standing up to others, but standing up to yourself. Word about the meeting spread quietly. Some students were surprised. Some were hopeful. Some were still skeptical. But it showed the school that even those who had hurt others could choose to change. That growth was possible. The girl did not stop writing her notes. But now her words had a new depth. They were about healing as much as they were about strength. About seeing each other as more than labels or colors. About understanding the stories behind the anger and fear. One day, at the Circle of Voices, the girl read a new note aloud. It said, behind every hurt there is a story. Behind every anger there is a wound. We cannot heal if we do not listen. We cannot change if we do not care. Let us be brave enough to see each other's pain and gentle enough to hold it with kindness. The room was full of students, some wiping tears from their eyes. The boy who had once been a bully sat quietly in the back. He listened. He did not speak. But his presence was a sign that the school was no longer divided by fear and anger. It was a place where healing could begin. The girl's courage to face her bully, and the boy's courage to face himself, became a story told quietly among students and teachers. A story about how darkness can meet light, how fear can meet hope, how pain can meet forgiveness. The school was still not perfect. Some days were harder than others. But now, when someone felt lost or angry, there were places to go and people to talk to. The wall of words still stood strong. The circle of voices still met. And the girl with the notebook kept writing, not just for herself but for everyone who wanted to find peace. That day, the school learned an important truth. That change does not come from punishment or silence. It comes from understanding, from connection, from courage to face the past and choose a better future. And that truth was louder than any shout. The weeks that followed felt like the turning of a great wheel. The school was no longer just a place where students learned math, science, or history. It had become a place where hearts and minds were opening in ways no one expected. The courage of one girl who refused to be silenced had created a ripple that grew into waves. Those waves touched every student, every teacher, and even the hallways themselves. The school was waking up from a long sleep. The girl with the notebook still walked those halls. She did not need to be loud or demanding to be noticed. Her presence was calm but strong, like a tree that stands steady through storms. More students came to the Circle of Voices each week. They shared their stories, their fears, and their dreams. The wall of words became a living mural of hope, filled with colors and shapes made by students from every grade. The boy who had once grabbed her collar became one of her quiet allies. He helped put up new notes. He listened when others spoke. Slowly, he learned what kindness really meant. Not as a weakness, but as a power that could heal wounds and build bridges. He was not perfect. Sometimes old habits came back. But now he had friends who reminded him to be better. He had a new story to write. Teachers noticed a change too. Classes felt safer. Students were kinder to one another. The school counselors found more students coming for help, not because they were in trouble, but because they wanted to be heard. The principal made a special announcement one morning. She said the school would hold an event called the Day of Respect. It would be a day to celebrate differences, to learn from each other, and to promise that bullying would no longer be ignored or accepted. On the Day of Respect, the gym was decorated with bright banners. There were speeches, music, and performances by students. The girl with the notebook was asked to say a few words. She stood before the crowd, her heart steady but her voice gentle. She said, "We all have a story. Some stories are easy to tell. Others are full of pain. But every story matters. Every person matters. Bullying is not just about words or actions. It is about forgetting that we are all connected. When we choose kindness, we choose to see the person behind the skin, behind the clothes, behind the silence. Her words were met with a quiet applause, the kind that feels like a warm hug. After the event, many students talked about what they could do to keep the kindness alive. Some wanted to start clubs. Others wanted to make videos to share the message beyond the school walls. The girl thought about all that had happened, about the collar that was grabbed, the words she spoke, the notes she wrote, and the friendships that grew. She knew the fight against bullying was not over. It was a journey, not a destination. But she also knew that every small step mattered. She opened her notebook one last time and wrote, "We are stronger when we stand together. We are braver when we speak with truth. We are kinder when we remember we all belong. Let us be the change we wish to see." As the story of the school spread beyond the classrooms, more young people heard the message. They saw that standing up did not always mean fighting. Sometimes it meant writing a note, sharing a story, or simply being there for someone else. And now, if you have listened to this story, if you believe in the power of kindness and courage, here is what you can do. Like this story, if it touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to hear more stories that inspire and remind us that we are not alone. Together, we can build schools and communities where everyone feels safe, seen, and respected. Because every voice matters. Every story matters. And together, we can make the world a better place.